I'm Chris.
And I'm Yaniv.
And today's episode, it's going to go completely off the rails.
Hey, should we do that introduction where you can say, hey, I'm Palestinian, I say, and I'm Israeli? Or is that too
I like that. No, I love that.
Okay.
Let's do that. Hey, I'm Palestinian.
And I'm Israeli. So, yeah, we were talking at the beginning of recording. It's like, oh, what should we talk about today? What's on your mind? And Chrissy said, well, what's really on my mind is the conflict in Israel.
Yeah.
And we started talking, but at that point, we'd already begun recording. And I actually think that we ended up having a really interesting conversation as two people whose heritage is on the two different sides here, but who both really are humanists, I guess, and would love to see a solution to discuss all the ways in which the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is misrepresented. And although this is really nothing to do with the Startup Podcast, we felt the conversation was valuable enough that we'd like to put it out there. And you know what, Chris? It's our goddamn feed. We can do whatever the fuck we like.
Yeah, and I want to stress a couple of things, I guess. The first is we recorded this by accident almost. It was not intended to be an episode. And so, we might be talking over each other more or be fairly raw. And I don't even know when we started recording, so maybe the very beginning of it's cut off. I think the other thing worth noting is if we were to record it as an episode, we may have shared more nuance or more caveats as we were talking, but that's not what we did. And, at least for me, Yaniv, I think it'll be easy for someone listening to this to tag me as whatever they want to tag me, anti-Semitic or something. I think if you take that away from the conversation, then you are at best disingenuous or at worst brain dead. This is not about being anti or pro-Semitic. It's about dealing with the political and practical realities of war. It's not about a people writ large. It's about politics and religion and scarcity and resources and all this kind of stuff.
And morality, right?
And morality, yeah. And actually, one thing I always like to say to people is the phrase anti-Semitic is dumb, because actually Arabic is a Semitic language. They're both Semites. Both groups are Semites. We're both Semitic on this conversation. And it's actually just a terrible label in general. But it's used as a cudgel to end debate. And what we need actually is a well-meaning, earnest, honest debate about the politics and about the people involved.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Like I said, I would consider us, in a sense, both humanists. Like, it's just horrible to see the pain and suffering and death on both sides. We think that all of this killing is morally repugnant, and we're talking about this situation and, how does it all end? And, I think it's poignant because, like we said, Chris, I come from an Israeli background, you come from a Palestinian background. We're sitting here in Australia. We've never discussed our backgrounds before. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about a multicultural country like Australia is it's not particularly relevant most of the time. But, when this sort of thing is happening, it's like, wow, it just felt like something worth discussing. And so that's what we've done.
Yeah, as I say eventually in the episode, accidents of birth have never had any interest to me, right? Gender, ethnicity, culture, background. As racists are fond of saying, some of my best friends are Israeli and Jews. It has never meant anything to me. Many of my collaborators in the US, I felt like never asked my background or never cared about my background and vice versa. And we have that luxury, Yaniv, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have that luxury to set that aside and to not care about that. And the luxury of food and shelter and education and distance and perspective. And boy, aren't we lucky that we have that luxury. I think the point is that some people don't have that luxury, and how do we solve this and bring a little peace to the world? Testing, 1, 2.
What else is on your mind?
Israel, Palestine is on my mind.
Well, it's a bit off topic.
It is off topic. That's what's like kind of lit a fire under my ass that I want to do an all-in style podcast, because this is the kind of stuff I talk about.
You've got family in Lebanon? No, that's your background.
I'm sure.
Like your family's from there.
Yeah, I'm sure I've got like distant cousins or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
The thing that struck me the most was, it was always an intellectual abstraction for me until one day I saw in one of the previous bombings of Gaza, this kid running down the street covered in like 9/11 style dust and debris.
Yeah.
And he looked like me when I was a child.
Yeah.
And like, that's when it went from like, fuck, that's an abstraction to there, but for the grace of God.
It's such a like fucked up, intractable situation.
It is, but the thing is, for me, the thing that makes me 2x upset, 10x upset, is everybody else's reductive hot take
Yeah.
of like, I stand with Palestine no matter what. It's like, well, they're fucking beheading babies, you feckless moron. And then it's like, I stand with Israel no matter what. It's like, they're bombing the fuck out of an open air camp. Like, how do you
Yeah.
stand with either? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's I think I've been there for a long time, and that's why I stay very quiet about this shit,
Yeah.
because I'm like,
An unequivocal black and white take is the most laughably
mm,
inhumane, unsophisticated, and these are
yeah,
people like and like these people who are investing in tech and investing in innovation, and they're the smartest people in the world, and they're making these reductive black and white assessments.
yeah. And I've always felt, that a lot of the, like the, let's call it the Jewish associations and spokes, like community groups, they overplay, not overplay their hand, but they're just like, they're too strident. They're like, you have
Mm.
to support us, and like they go too far, and it always makes me uncomfortable. It's like, someone saying yesterday, it's like, if you don't come out in support of Israel, then I don't want to know you. And I'm like, you
Yeah.
don't get to make
The,
these
the
sorts of demands of like everyone.
the absolutism
The
is,
absolutism, and like the,
yeah.
the lack of acceptance that, this situation didn't come out of nowhere. It's like
Yeah, that's right.
developed over at least a century, or like several
Yeah.
millennia, depending on how you view it. But
Yeah, I mean, you can start counting from wherever, right? And
yeah,
and I think, you know, I think
it's just
Zionists want to start counting millennia ago.
yeah,
Palestinians want to start counting 60 years ago. And then like the Jewish groups want to start counting last week. It's like, oh my God, they attacked us out of nowhere. It's just like, are you fucking kidding? And then the mind virus of like any criticism is anti-Semitism. I'm like, well,
yeah.
firstly,
It drives me nuts. And like so, I feel like, what do I say? Like, either I need to come out like, yeah. So I just shut up. I'm like, I'm gonna piss someone off massively, no matter what I say.
yeah, but the for me, the lack of conviction or confidence and the standing aside, the willingness to stand by the sidelines and go, there's a no win for me, and there's no way for me to look good and for me to win this, so I'm gonna say no. And to me, it feels like at the very least, you have to say something about the absolutism,
Mm,
which is what I've been doing. And
yeah,
I'm sure people want to read it anyway they want to read it, but it's like there is no absolutism in this situation. I mean, I'm sorry. There is a lot of absolutism, but it's not from one side. It's like you're not allowed to behead babies. I think that's probably something you could clearly, comfortably
yep,
go out on a limb and say. And you're not allowed to indiscriminately bomb an open air prison where people can't escape because there are babies in there too. I don't think you're
yep,
allowed to say that.
yep,
And
yep.
it's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, I guess what you'd say, like, one relatively easy thing to say is there's been bad leadership on both sides for quite a long time.
well, I would say actually there is great leadership on the Israeli side. It's fantastic. They own the narrative. They've come up with this way of eliminating dissent. They have statesmanship and relationships with
Okay,
world
so
governments.
it depends. It depends on your goals, right? It
The
depends on your
goal is to
goals.
take over the entire area. Like
It's
that's
not. It's
not.
not. It's not viable. It's like it's a nonsense goal.
No, it is.
Like
I
they've got
disagree with you.
five. What are they going to do with those 5 million people?
They're already taken over the whole area. Like
I'm just saying, I don't think that's what's happening. Like, the people aren't going anywhere. The Palestinians aren't going anywhere. They're being treated badly.
the space gets
The space gets
the
smaller.
space gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it becomes a powder
Yeah,
keg,
and then this sort of shit happens, and then what?
and
And
then they
then what?
bomb it back to the Stone
And
Age.
then
So
what?
they did.
And then what? Like, there's no end game. There's no end game.
I mean, this is the thing. Two things I want to say about this. The first is there's a bunch of Palestinian, militants whose stated goal is the eradication of Israel, right?
Yep.
Bad, 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 stupid, 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 never going to happen. Okay.
Yep.
And then the stated position of Israel is two-state solution, or we want to coexist, or we want to find a way to
Yep.
peace. There's the problem with that. There's like, if you want to know what's in someone's heart, you just look at their actions, not look at their words, right?
Yep.
And so the actions are they're slowly but surely like leveling homes and creating
Yep.
whatever and eroding the available land. but it's no longer just actions. So my most recent interview that I saw with Netanyahu was, oh yeah, the two-state solution is not really viable. The piece of land is too small, and a jet could fly over within a second. And so, basically, we have to be in control of the whole land.
Yeah.
And so he's basically said there is never going to be a Palestinian state, and we don't believe in a two-state solution either.
No, I know. So what's the end game? I don't think they're going actual like Nazi style genocide, which means you've got a lot of Palestinians. Like literally, what are you going to do with them? You concentrate them, it becomes a powder keg. They attack. There's no end game. Like
they're just reducing the population, taking the land. Reducing the population,
I don't
taking the
think
land.
they're not reducing the population. I guess that's a bit where I disagree with you. Like I know a lot of people have died and are going to die, and that's horrible. But numerically, it's a small proportion of the population that's going to die. Like, and birth rates are very high. Like the Palestinian population's been growing for years. So I don't agree with you on that. It's unless you do like active, like Nazi style genocide, which I genuinely don't believe is on the cards. I fucking hope not. Then there's no end game. I mean, the end game might be somehow forcing Jordan and Egypt to take them in, but Jordan and Egypt are also like, la, let's just, pretend this isn't happening.
Yeah.
And put all the heat on Israel. And, they're not acting in a lot of Arab Brotherhood here.
Maybe there's no end game, but
Yeah.
the step before the end game is making a Palestinian state inviable, right? And they've been making it inviable through narrative, through resource constraints, through demonstrating the barbarity of the reaction, and through eroding it through settlements.
So it's good leadership. It's good leadership if you're sort of like a massive ethno-nationalist. If you're like a normal I think most Israelis just want a prosperous, peaceful, liberal. I don't think Israel is being well led towards that aim. It's being led towards let's fucking be in eternal war and but have the most land and fuck the Palestinians. Then well executed. But
I think the calculation is that the war. The chaos is a ladder, to quote Joker from The Dark Knight, right?
No, so it's not Joker from The Bad Knight. It's fucking Littlefinger from Game of Thrones.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. That's better. Yeah, but it's like continue to apply pressure until the barbarism explodes every 2, 3, 5 years, like a clock.
Then you got a pretext.
Level the whole area, and set them back to the Stone Age, which allows us to continue to build to make the state inviolable and take over parts of the land. And you just keep doing rinse and repeat until people finally go.
Sort of. But even then, I think that's an oversimplification. You've got to separate the West Bank and Gaza. So the West Bank, they want that land, and they've been fucking going into it. Gaza, they have no presence in Gaza, and have not taken any territory from Gaza since 2006. I don't know what their plan is for Gaza.
The foreign minister or whoever was on, I saw an interview with him, and he was like, we are basically going to reshape Gaza, and it will be better for us and better for them. That was their stated goal now for Gaza. I don't know. I got no idea. I agree with you. I don't know what the hell the point is of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, Egypt. I imagine that if Egypt were willing to play ball, they could just have it, but they don't want it because it comes with all the
Egypt doesn't want
the people there, and they don't want the people. It's the same with Jordan.
Lebanon doesn't want people.
No one's ever cared about Palestinian rights. No. The West Bank was part of Jordan until the 6-Day War. It was.
But why would you care about Palestinian rights, right? The general narrative is that Palestine or Palestinians and Hamas are the equivalent, right? So they're animals and that behead babies. Why would you want those people around you? They're uneducated and desperate and poor and a drain on resources because of their circumstances. I'm not talking about their inherent.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Their circumstances, and so the narrative sucks. Their circumstances suck, and therefore their reality sucks, right? Of the culture and the people and the education and it's like all children because it's like they there's nothing else to do there except have kids, and so it's my family is Palestinian, as a
Yeah.
Palestinian, I don't want a bunch of Palestinians coming to Australia. Like, what? Where is there for them to go? Who?
Yeah,
And
I
then,
know. There's a
yeah,
great irony, which is like that's exactly the position the Jews were in Europe in the 40s.
of course, because that saying, "Hurt people
Well,
hurt."
well, there's that, but I mean, the point is more an unwanted people with nowhere for them to go. And the
Yeah,
solution to one of those problems created the new problem, right? It's like, oh, okay, let's give the Jews a homeland. It's like, great, we've absolved our guilt over, all the shit we've done. Plus, we've gotten rid of them off, out of our
yeah, out of
continent.
everyone else's face. Yeah, that's right.
Um,
Oh man,
and
my
then they're
um
like,
my
yeah,
my favorite, one of my favorite things I ever wrote or ever said, and then I wrote it down, was this idea of, and you're alluding to it now, which is there are brutalized people who've been oppressed, slaughtered, and dehumanized by the other side, and they're lashing out in whatever way they have at their disposal, and their enemy wants them eradicated from the face of the earth. Wouldn't you want to defend yourself at all costs? And then the person I was talking to said, "Well, which side are you talking about?" And I was like,
yeah,
"Exactly,
exactly.
right? Exactly."
Yeah.
And so it's they share the same story. One of my also one of my favorite moments in television history. I'm a big TV nerd. Is The West Wing.
I love the West Wing.
There's a small arc about Israel Palestine,
Mm.
and there's at the end of the first day or second day of negotiations, they're showing how some of them are doing Passover and some of them are doing, the Israeli side is doing Passover, I think, and the Palestinian side is doing something else, and they're cutting back and forth between them
Mm.
and
Mm.
showing how they're so similar. They're
Yeah.
so, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. 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 Land, it's a bitch. It's like it's the last great tragedy of colonialism, It's like, I also think it's interesting watching this, and at the same time we're having this voice referendum over here, because it's like it's all about land and colonialism, and some parts of the world there have been many, many waves of people coming in and taking other people's land. That's sort of the human condition.
yeah, but
And what do you owe to the people? Yeah.
where it becomes worse is when you wrap land and resource disputes with religious dogma.
Well,
And
that's always the way. It's like fucking like you look at the war in Yugoslavia and like the ongoing, like it's never settled. They all still fucking hate each other because they've got all these origin stories that are tied up to the land. And in the same
mm,
way as Jerusalem is like holy to everyone, like Kosovo is holy to everyone, like whatever, like same shit.
yeah, yeah, but I
Um,
mean, Israel has the ethnic differences and the cultural and religious differences between those parties, but
mm.
then you add the evangelical and Christian perspective from the US of
Oh
like
yeah, they're
the
nutcases.
Jews need to be in control and if Israel for Jesus to come back. And it's just like there's this meta religious narrative that makes
Yeah,
it not just about who gets to live here and what religion gets to live here. It
yeah,
becomes an existential, threat for the soul of civilization.
yep.
Um,
Well, the soul of your soul, like
yeah,
yeah, and,
the
and
soul.
there's these small like ultra orthodox Jewish sects that are like pro-Palestinian because they think that the Jews can't be in control for their Messiah to come.
Oh,
So
really?
it's like what the fuck? So they're all living in New York waving Palestinian flags. It's like what the fuck?
Yeah. But like if we were to ever, I've been, we're just talking amongst us, but like, you post this, people go, well, he's anti-Semitic, he's a self-hating Jew. And it's
Yeah,
just
I
like,
know.
end of discussion. Thank you. You're done.
There was
It's
actually
like,
an
what?
amazing post on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it by a Jewish guy. I don't know if he was American or Israeli, and it was a kind of like it was a long form post and
Mm.
actually extremely balanced and sort of like this conversation we're having. And then yeah, everyone went after him. I'm like, dude, it's like you can't pretend that, the Palestinians it's like it's not a justification, but like you said, if you create a powder keg, it's gonna go off at some point. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, the head of the UN went to Gaza and said it was hell on earth. Like, what do you think's gonna happen? And that doesn't make it okay, but it also makes it sort of inevitable.
I have such a bizarre relationship with all of this because I'm so
Yeah.
pro US. I'm so pro equality. I'm so uninterested in people's uh, uh, characteristics of a person that are defined at birth,
Yeah.
culture and
Yeah.
gender. I'm just so uninterested in all this stuff. And yet I'll watch it with some amount of academic detachment,
Mm.
but then something will like tweak in me. And this one thing that really tweaked me is, I don't know why, but I was watching this interview on CNN with this, they didn't mention this, but clearly she seemed to be like a Muslim Palestinian American
Yeah.
trapped in Gaza.
Yeah.
And, there are so many people dying in Gaza, but this one, I'll say like, I want to say attractive, but in the word, not in this like, oh, I was attracted to her, but like, she
Yeah.
is a presentable person. She's a good
Yeah.
poster
Yeah.
child for a topic, right?
Yeah.
And she's stuck in Gaza. The American embassy can't help her, and CNN is like telling the story of how there's an American and multiple Americans stuck in Gaza and not being helped by America. And it just like really brings it home that even a US citizen has no rights in Gaza. Those rights
Mm.
are usurped by the blanket authority of Israel has a right to protect itself.
Mm.
Right? In no other place in the world would an American, and I'm sorry, I missed the most important detail. She was sitting there talking to Jake Tapper on CNN, and 3 times the interview was interrupted by bombs and going outside. And you can see her trying to stay calm and professional on TV while literally bombs are going off outside. And Jake had to stop her and say, "I'm sorry, are those bombs going off outside?" She's like, it's happening all the time, all the
Yeah.
time. It's like it's all around us, and I like that brought me to tears because I was like, this is the moral certitude and clarity why like this is perfectly fine. No other country or situation in the world would it be okay to level the ground, and America's like, we back you 100%. Go for it. It's awesome.
Well, if America does it, like they did in Afghanistan, they did in Iraq.
Yeah. Well, that was I was saying to a friend of mine is that Israel is an American outpost, so it's like it is America.
Well,
it's the same thing.
It's a very, very close, unique relationship.
There is no closer relationship. None. I mean,
yeah, I would say that's probably
I think,
true.
Yeah, and
it's fucking
and again
messed up. And yeah, and it is understandable, but kind of like frustrating to me, like on social media and stuff, and like seeing all these Israelis just being very black and white. I'm like, yeah, posted something just before about like, when it's like civilization versus barbarism. That wasn't him, but like I've seen that a few times. I'm like, oh, fuck off. Like, it's more complicated. It's a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
It's like, people just can't handle the complication of it. It's
they can't hold two ideas in their mind, and they think if you're having any kind of nuance, then you're somehow they immediately go, well, then you're justifying blah blah blah. And it's like,
no, you can say that the situation in Gaza is horrible and that it creates and it radicalizes people and that it's not okay to behead babies. You can say both those things.
Right.
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
but,
I mean,
and it's, but there's so many layers to it, right? You can say that the actions of the Israeli government are radicalizing the Palestinians. They're being radicalized, and so resistance is appropriate. That's one layer. And then you can say, but beheading babies is not appropriate. That's another layer. But then there's an whole other layer, which is those people are desperate and have no tools at their disposal, and yet it's still not okay to behead babies.
Yep.
But Israel is not desperate and has all the tools at their disposal, and yet they are murdering babies. Like they are flattening Gaza. There are babies in that rubble.
Yep.
So at you're saying, well, there's no justification for murdering babies. Of course there isn't. So why is there justification for Israel murdering babies? Like
Yeah.
that's a whole other layer, which it seems like nobody wants to engage with. It's almost like nobody 80% of people don't want to engage with that bottom part.
Yeah.
Some of the sophisticated people want to, but they won't go one step further, which is therefore there is no justification for Israel to be killing babies. Like
Where,
that.
where,
That
where
is
where I
like
thought where I thought you were going to go with that is yeah, you know, what Israel's done radicalizes Palestinians. They go behead babies. Um, Beheading babies radicalizes Israelis. Like it
yes.
pushes everyone further apart. Like, Israel is a genuine
And then they go
democracy,
kill
right?
babies. But hang on,
Yeah.
but it has to be
Yeah, I
said,
know.
then they're going to kill babies. They're both doing the same fucking thing. The only difference is that a Palestinian asshole, Hamas militant, whatever, is doing it with a machete, and the other one's doing it with a US sponsored bomb. And like, just because one is more intimate than the other doesn't make it worse. They're both horrific. And it's
Yeah.
so angering. Like it's disgusting. And my taxpayer dollars that I paid in the US are going to that, and like my heritage people are doing that. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it is.
It's man.
I mean, my family got out of there because they're like, this is fucking horrible. Like, why would you raise children here if you didn't have to?
Yeah. But our families had that choice, right?
Yeah, I know, I
Your
know, I know.
Israelis had that choice today, and
Yeah,
my family saw the writing on the wall and got out. And the Palestinians in Gaza don't have that choice, and so like it's this go to me. So when I could go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in my head, with a pox on both their houses, right?
that's where
But
I
then
end up
I always,
usually. It's like, Jesus.
sorry,
Yeah, I sort of, at some point, I just end up like,
yeah,
yeah,
but here's where I
pox on
land in
both
the
your
end.
houses. Like, yeah,
Yeah, but here's where I land at the end. With great power comes great with responsibility,
yeah,
and the Palestinians have no power.
yeah,
And so when I go seesaw back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, at the end of the day, the responsibility lies with Israel and it lies with the US, because they have the power. They have the ability to make rational choices. And it doesn't matter what a Palestinian does or a Palestinian authority does is irrelevant unless the Israelis and the US make a choice, right? Or make and like there's no. So anyway, I think it's all turtles all the way down until when I get all the way to the bottom. If you have power, you have the luxury of making choices
you do.
and breaking the cycle.
It's hard. Yeah, fuck, it's hard. Yeah, it's like this one goes deep. There's more turtles on this one than any other. It's
Yeah,
just like,
the turtles are
yeah,
covered.
a
It's covered
pox,
in
a
shit.
pox on all their houses. It's like no one has behaved well. Israel hasn't behaved well. America hasn't behaved well. Egypt hasn't behaved well. Jordan hasn't behaved well. Iran's
The
certainly not
Brit
behaving well.
the
Yeah,
British.
no one. Yeah, right. It's like who's behaved well here? Like they the British didn't behave well. Yeah, during the Mandate, the Ottomans didn't behave well. Like it's like there's never been a Palestinian state, which is no justification for there shouldn't be one. But like Palestinians have always copped it. You know that better than me. Like
Yeah, but the. Yeah, again, I can't I arrive at these conclusions which are like on one hand to me it feels like the Australian Aborigines or the Native Americans, you know, it's as if they would continue to resist with violent resistance. It's like that's over. The land is gone.
yeah,
Now the only question is how do you assimilate and participate? And
yeah,
so some part of me feels like, hey, you Palestinians, like it's fucking over.
it's over.
It's been over for 50 years or whatever since the 6 Day War. Move on. So, but then part of me is like, hang on a second. How do you move on from Gaza? Like, how do you get
Yeah,
out of Gaza? You
yeah.
you
Well, that's
can't move on.
You know,
And so,
the place it sort of reminds me of, like I said, I keep coming back to colonialism, but like it reminds me of South Africa because generally, in most parts of the world where there was colonialism, which is basically everywhere, there were like roughly two models. Like one is you kind of more or less wipe out the indigenous population and you create a, Western European country like America, Australia, New Zealand, whatever, Brazil, whatever. Or you only ever had like a small ruling class, and when colonialism ends, then you have self-determination, like India, most of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, whatever. Then you've got a couple of countries where you've both got a lot of settlers and a lot of natives. The idea that all the Israelis will like leave and go back to fucking Poland or whatever is stupid. But the idea that all the Palestinians can just leave is also stupid. And yes, they've lost, but they haven't lost in the way that, Native Americans or Australian Aboriginals have lost. Like, it's not just like, okay, we sort of have to just figure out, how to get on in this society that is not ours.
because there's still hope and there's still land, but
And there's
this is actually
population. You have to consider, like, population is a real factor. Numbers matter.
Yeah,
Like,
but here's the other counter.
Aborigines are like 3% of the population here. The Palestinians, if you count, like, greater Israel and like count the number of Jews and the number of Palestinians, it's, it's fairly close to even.
That's fair, yeah.
And that's like South Africa. I mean,
here's
South
the other
Africa, yeah.
But I was gonna say, here's the other counterintuitive take I have on this, which is like, I think people who have sympathies for Palestine, they're like, oh, the Abraham Accords were so bad, and I'm like, actually, I think the Abraham Accords are amazing because they extinguish the final fake vestiges of hope. Once you eliminate the hope, you can then deal with the reality, which is that Israel is not going anywhere. The whole Arab world has normalized relations.
Well, Saudi Arabia was about to, right? Like, apparently that is at least, one of the theories as to why this attack happened now. Like, the Palestinians, the Hamas are always desperate, but the Iranians are like, the Iranians don't want like normalization between Israel and the Arab world because, they're playing their own game.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I mean, Israel and Saudi Arabia are about to like, normalize relations and, have like fucking flights and shit.
Yeah, but that's been delayed at least or scuttled at
Well, that's right. And that was Iran's
that was the
plan,
goal, I think,
allegedly.
yeah.
Like, but yeah, like other Middle Eastern countries have never been real friends of the Palestinians. Like they say the nice things, but they won't put their money where their mouth is. And they never, they never do.
Which is worse than, we talk on the podcast about like, bad advice is worse than no advice. It's like bad for friends who give you lip service and tell you they support you, but it's worse than just telling them. Which is why the Abraham Accords are so great. It's like, no, sorry, you're on your own. So stop pretending like you have a chance. It's like at least it's a quick no, like a VC, right? It's like a fast no is better than just like a maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny. Like something that doesn't get talked about much is like the Israeli, well, whatever, I guess it gets called very different things on the different sides, but what the Israelis call the War of Independence in 1948, right? There was the partition. There's supposed to be a Palestinian state and a Jewish state. And then that war happened. And why was there no Palestinian state at the end? Right, partly Israel made territorial gains, but then the rest of it got annexed by Jordan. Like,
yeah,
the West Bank was supposed to be the Palestinian state back then too.
Yeah. Because I mean that's what when I talk about like kind of the get over it, it's like the Arab countries made their gambit. They tried to take it all, and they lost.
Yep.
And the Palestinians lost the worst. And so it's like you're fucking done. You had your try. You did you did your thing, and you lost. And on the other hand, on the flip side, the Jews got the land, they cultivated the land, they defended the land, they built relationships and treaties, they built an incredible fucking culture and society. End of story. It's done.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, there's a view. It's not my view, but it like there's a bit of me that's like, okay, this is just reality. Is the sort of the completely amoral view of just human civilizations, which is like there has been a war, there've been conflict over land and various forms of genocide for millennia. And, it's just I guess it's the amoral view of raw power, right? Like whoever has power, like you say, with great power comes great responsibility, but that's a moral view. An amoral view is with great power comes great power, and it's like whoever has the power wins, whoever doesn't have the power loses. And that's just how it is, right? And it's like, it has ever been thus, and it sucks, but it's also true.
Yeah, but I'm kind of saying, I guess I'm saying oddly both, which is with great power, there's great power, and the power was exercised, the power was effectively deployed, and the power won. Great.
Yeah.
That is a legitimate win.
Yep.
And now with the comfort of billions of dollars of aid and weapons and economic success, now with great power means you have to resolve the vestiges of the thing you won. It's now your responsibility. I'm talking about your in the abstract, right?
Yeah.
Responsibility to take ownership of the remaining remnants of the problem and deal with it ethically and morally. And so it is first a utilitarian view, you win, and then a moral view, you need to clean up the mess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree with you. I'd also say that's a fairly rare combination of views out there right now.
I agree, which is why I wanted to do the All In podcast, because I don't see anybody saying what I'm thinking, which is, like literally a Palestinian saying the Palestinians fucking lost, get over it, but they can't get over it, they're stuck, and they have no power. It's like the classic racist line. Many of my friends are Jewish. I love Israelis and Jews. Like it's over. It's over. But you guys, in the abstract, are now responsible for finding some ethical, humane path for solving the remnants.
That's why I come back to That's why I come back to the population thing. It's a real problem. Again, just from this kind of amoral or even the moral view, right? Because it's like, if there were far fewer Palestinians, or if the balance of populations was very different, there would be, I think, more of a pathway to sort of annexing, the territories and making Palestinians Israeli citizens. Because, there are quite a lot of like Arab Israeli citizens, and although they are disadvantaged in a lot of ways, like legally and whatever, they are full citizens with full rights. They get to vote. There are Arab parties in the Israeli government or in the Israeli parliament and so on. And Israel's has always been okay having an Arab minority. What they will not do is like what the South African solution was, which is effectively having a Palestinian majority or near majority that can then access the democratic levers of power. They won't accept that. Whether you think they should, which is fair.
I think it's fair.
But it means it cuts off one path, right? It cuts off a pathway to resolving the issue. Because what do you do with all the people morally? What do you do with all the people morally while also taking the W? By saying, okay, we've won, you've lost. Now, what do we do about that?
Yeah, so I actually once wrote, when I was much clearer headed about this, it was something like, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was something like this, a declaration of a 10-step plan that Israel would make, a unilateral declaration for peace, which would be something like, we are going to freeze all settlements, we are going to freeze all bombings, we're going to freeze all retaliation, we're going to freeze all everything. And we are going to allow, let's say, the free flow of whatever, water supplies, development, whatever, and we invite the entire world to help create a thriving Palestinian civilization.
They did the first half of that in Gaza in 2006.
They did, but the key is mapping out a multi-step plan in public and basically saying there is no way to provoke us. We are done. You lob rockets, lob whatever you like, we're done. We take the moral high ground. Like we just lock it down.
There's this quote, I've never been able to find it again. I believe it's from Nietzsche, but it's something like the strength of a civilization can be measured by how much what was I say?
How little it reacts.
Yeah, like how much attack against it can tolerate without responding. It's like,
Yes.
It is a flea on the back of an elephant, I am so powerful, I don't care. That is the measure of strength. And,
Yeah.
Nietzsche is an interesting character too, right? Because he was like, his most famous book is Beyond Good and Evil. And basically he has this sort of, not amoral view, but basically he feels that, the idea of good and evil, of moralizing power, like strength, as a negative thing, he doesn't agree. And he's like, we should go to good and bad, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, good and evil suggests some kind of innate biblical level
Yeah.
binary state.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is like, he sees it as sort of Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic sort of thing that invented good and evil, which makes it even more ironic in this context. And he's like, that
Right.
sort of more, I guess, feudal idea was good and bad, right?
I don't know.
It's...
So we're going to record a podcast.
Are we brave enough to turn this into a podcast?
Honestly, I don't care.
But it would be sort of cool.
I would have spoken more delicately with more equivocation, but
I kind of feel like, especially, I didn't realize that your background was Palestinian. I thought you were Lebanese background.
well, I'm Lebanese because my parents left Palestine.
So refugees,
and,
yeah, okay,
and
that bit I
went,
didn't
went
realize.
to went to Lebanon, and then they went to
Right. Well, so that
Australia.
makes it a bit more poignant, right? Like we've got, a Palestinian and whatever the fuck I am. I don't know, guy with an Israeli name, anyway. In Australia, kind of talking about the reality of this situation. I think it's kind of cool.
Okay, that was the bulk of our conversation. Off the cuff, raw and unfiltered, so hopefully that provided some food for thought as you guys go about thinking about this and debating it amongst yourself.
I think it was an important conversation, and I'm glad we had it. And again, just to reiterate, we're talking about the causes and the politics, but really, ultimately, at the base of that, we have a humanist view. We think it is awful, the death and destruction and the hatred that has been unleashed, and we hope that there is a way through it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not clear in the discussion, our hearts, our minds, and our intention to help in some way goes out to all the victims of the violence, all of them, and the victims of circumstance. It's heartbreaking, and I'm tearing up just talking about this. It's heartbreaking on so many levels. And so for anybody who's been touched by this tragedy and violence, our hearts are with you. All right, guys, we'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.
See you, Chris.